Hey there sewers, welcome to Dartandsew. Today's tutorial is a jacket alteration. Have you ever wanted a certain piece of clothing but could not find it in your style? Well, I've wanted a cropped suede jacket for a long time, but I could never find one that fit me the right way. So I decided to make one. Instead of sewing one from scratch, I did an alteration to an existing jacket. I found a suede jacket with just the right fabric texture and color. But as you can see, it was too baggy and longer than I wanted. So I did this sketch and I'm going to show you how I made the alteration using some shortcuts. So here's the jacket and it has a lining, as you can see. So the first thing we have to do is separate the lining from the outer shell in order to access the seams. Usually there is a small hand-stitched area where you can start seam ripping at the hem. Normally I would use a seam ripper to remove the lining, but since I was going to crop the bottom, I didn't have to save the lower seam. So I used scissors to cut it open. I also opened the center front lining, but only up to the waist. I repeated the process on the other side. Now that I have the lining separated, it's time to shorten the jacket. This jacket happened to have a seam at the waistline. That's a good length for my jacket, so I'm using it as a guide for the new length. I'm leaving an inch below that line to give myself extra seam allowance and marking it all around. Now I'm cutting the outer shell of the jacket using that guide, and I'm making sure that the lining is out of the way. Next, I measured and marked the lining 2 inches longer than the jacket for extra seam allowance. Now I'm cutting the lining using that guide. Now it's time to do the alteration on the bodice and the sleeves. The lining is still attached at the sleeve, so I'm separating it using a seam ripper. Now I have full access to the bodice and sleeve. I'm using clips after I smooth out the bodice to get rid of the wrinkles. I'm using my other short jacket to mark the new size I want. I measured the width and length of the bodice and sleeve. I marked those measurements on the jacket for my new seam lines. I'm making a curve at the corner where the two lines meet to avoid a pointy angle. Now it's time to sew. First, I did a test stitch with a scrap fabric, especially because I have not sewn suede before. After I tried a few settings on my machine, I decided to use a Teflon presser foot, which is smooth at the bottom and worked well for this type of fabric. I used 100/16 heavyweight needle and 100% polyester thread, and I increased my stitch length to 3.5, which worked the best. The tension on my machine was set on auto. If you don't have that option on your machine, you can lower the thread tension using the dial on your machine. Now here's the new seam line. The sleeves have been tapered and the bodice has been tapered. I'm going to cut the excess fabric, leaving 1/2 inch seam allowance. I'm putting in some clips so I don't accidentally cut the jacket. And before I pressed the seams, I tested a scrap fabric for the iron settings. After I finished pressing the seams, I clipped the seam allowance at the armpit to 1/4 inch to take out the bulk. Now it's time to do the hem of the lining. Since the old lining is larger than the new jacket width, I have to measure the difference and take in the lining accordingly. I decided to make the adjustment as a dart. I marked the difference at the center back. I only took in the lower part of the bodice because I did not want the lining to be too tight. I'm marking my dart legs. Now I'm going to pin the dart. Now I'm done pinning. I'm gonna go and sew this dart. I'm changing the needle from the heavy weight to the size 90 because the lining is a lighter fabric. I'm done sewing my dart. Now I'm gonna cut the excess fabric. I'm going to press the seam to the side to match the rest of the jacket lining. So this is what it looks like. It's time to now hem the lining. So what I'm going to do is fold up the lining and press it. Normally I would hand stitch this to the coat, but since this is suede, it would be difficult. So I will hem the lining by itself. But here at the side, since we have facing, I'll finish this off up to this part and I will sew the lining to the facing like this. And when you flip it over like that, and when you flip it over, it will look like this. So I'm going to do that first. So this is what it looks like from the inside. That's what it looks like. I'm gonna do the same to the other side. Now I'm going to fold up the lining and press. That looks good. It needs to be shorter than the jacket so it doesn't show. Now I'm going to trim it down to about 1 inch. Now I'm going to fold it twice and press. Now I'm going to stitch this close to the edge. And this is the result. And the hem of the lining is finished, and now it's time to hem the sleeve. Normally I would hand stitch this to the jacket, but I like how the raw edges look, so I decided to leave the sleeve unfinished. I like the raw edges at the bottom of the jacket as well, so I'm going to leave it like that since the fabric does not fray. And this is the final result. Please subscribe for future videos and share your comments. Thank you for watching.